Hi guys, welcome back to BioLecture. Today we're going to talk about evolution and how we ended up the way we are. So it all goes back to the dreaded DNA, which we've been talking about for, all year. So let's remember some facts about DNA. First thing is that DNA comes from our parents. We know that. We've done that. DNA, we get our DNA in our cells because we get half our DNA from the mom's egg, half our DNA from the dad's sperm, right? It comes together, it forms the zygote, right? And that's fertilization. We did that during meiosis. So our DNA is going to come from our parents. Second, it's found in all of our cells. It's found in the nucleus in every cell in our body, right? And third, it's going to hold the directions for making a protein, right? Let's remember transcription, translation, protein synthesis, all starts with DNA. We did all of that earlier this year. Last, what we worked on when we did genetics was that proteins, when they're expressed, are going to be called traits. And that's like, what gives me my hair color? What gives me my skin color, my eye color, right? Those are all of our traits. And those are really our proteins, which really come from our DNA. Remember all those jumps? Lastly, everyone's DNA is slightly different. That's why we don't look like our brothers and sisters, and you guys don't look like me, right? Fine, I look like my sister, but she's my twin. So our DNA is more similar than everyone else's. And last, those differences are called variations. And that's one of the new words for this week, right? Those differences are variations. When we talk about variations in a population, we're talking about those differences, which is caused by different DNA. All right, so variations are what are going to keep us alive. So look at all those frogs, right? We've got some that are dark green. Ooh, that wrote in white. Oh, goodness. Goodness, my writing is not working. So we have some that are dark green, right? We have some that are light green. This guy has the big eyes. This one has smaller eyes, kind of the same as this one, right? They're all a little bit different. So those variations or those differences in our DNA actually cause genetic diversity. That's what's called when you look at a big population. And genetic diversity makes it so that populations are able to adapt to changing environments. Now, how sometimes when like the population of an endangered species gets really low, they talk about losing genetic diversity and how there's problems in that. It's because the organisms are then unable to adapt to any kind of changes in the environment. So here's an example of a peppered moth. Okay, now there are two moths in both of these pictures. So this right here is one, and there's one. And on this one, here's one, and here's one. Do you see those? Maybe if I circle it in white, it might be better. This guy, that guy. This one I almost need to do in red. This one, and then this one's in red down there. All right, so there's two moths in both pictures. All of these moths are part of the same species, meaning they're able to reproduce, they're able to have offspring. But the picture is showing us variation found naturally in the peppered moth population. So this happens on its own. It's like brown hair versus blonde hair. That happens on its own. Dark skin versus light skin. That happens, right? These are variations within the population. The moths have color variations like that. So those variations are going to allow the moth population to adapt to changes in the environment. And we're going to talk about this a lot this week, because if I'm a bird, right? Let's make a bird. Bird. It's a V-bird, right? And I'm going to eat a moth on this tree. I'm going to eat that guy because I can see him, right? And on this tree, I'm going to eat that guy because I can see him. I'm not going to go hunting for the one that I can't see well. I'm just going to eat the guys I can see. Make sense? So our next thing is what? How many babies? Look at the pictures. The possum has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 babies. The mouse has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 babies, and the duck has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 babies, right? So clearly, organisms are having more offspring than necessary. They're not just replacing the two parents that are there, right? So 2 mice have 7, 2 ducks have 8. This year, ducks have babies every year. I mean, that's a lot of babies. They do this because litters are going to be big enough to account for the fact that there are losses as they grow up, right? Not all of those ducks make it. There's too many offspring for the environment to support. So which ones live? Makes sense? So if we look at this picture, here's variation, and the organisms that are best suited to the environment are the ones that are going to be able to live longer and have more offspring because they have what we call a reproductive advantage, meaning there's something that's going to give them the advantage and allow them to reproduce more often. Right? And when they reproduce, their offspring are going to carry that beneficial gene because traits are inherited through your DNA. This is stuff we know, right? Blue parents have blue babies. Now, in these blue babies, is there variation? Yes, they're different, right? Pink parents have pink babies. In those pink babies, is there variation? Yes, that's fine, but they're still passing on their traits to their offspring. And then lastly, the organisms with the genes that are less advantageous or don't give you an advantage end up dying out, right? Or they end up having less offspring. So look at this example. We got all these frogs. Let's say they live someplace where it's dark green. These ones have a reproductive advantage. They blend in. This poor guy, they get eaten. Right? If they don't get eaten, they have less babies because they can't get as much food because they can't come out of their hiding spot to go get food because they're light green and you can see them. That's how it happens, right? So then what? So all of these changes, all these factors are going to actually cause changes to occur, right? So individuals in the population now are going to carry that beneficial gene. So like with the frogs, they'll now be a darker color because that was a better gene to have. Makes sense? And to inherit that gene from your parents, and the parents are the ones who lived, they'll have that gene. And when you're talking about biology, this idea is called fitness. So organisms that are better able to survive and have offspring are considered the most fit in that environment. So all of these facts add up to natural selection, and that's what you call it when you talk about all of this together. It's the theory of natural selection. And what that theory states is exactly what we just said, is that, let's get a pen, that there are more offspring produced than can survive. Let's think of the possum, right? He had all those babies on his back, the ducks all following the mother. There wasn't just like one duck or two ducks, there was like 8, I think. After the more offspring produced than can survive, we can then notice that there's variation in those offspring, and the variation is inherited from the parents. That we know, mitosis, go back to DNA, the whole beginning of the year, right? So that variation is inherited. And some of that variation, our next step, is that some of that variation leads to better fitness, and some of it leads to worse fitness. It just depends on the environment that you're in, right? Think of the moths. Some of them white was good, some of them black was good. It depends on what tree you're living on. Okay, so that variation leading to better fitness is going to be our third part. And then the fourth part is that some of our individuals are better able to compete because they have better fitness, and because they have better variations, they're better able to compete for the resources, right? When we think of like animals, you can't think like humans, right? You need to think of like humans with The Walking Dead. Right? In The Walking Dead, you don't just go to the grocery store and get food. The ones who are better able to find food, right, who are sneakier, who, I don't know, have better traits, then survive and get more food. The other ones are eaten by zombies, right? So animals, the animals that blend in better can then go out and get food. The animals that don't blend in can't go out and get food, so they don't compete as well. All right? All of this leads to evolution, and our population will end up evolving. So the population will change over time to better fit the environment. And that's the key. It has to be about that particular environment. So if the environment changes, the population will slowly change again. Let's think about like if a volcano erupts, right? Everything's going to turn like charred black. And now any animal that was white or noticeable, or white or light colored, is now noticeable, right? And if the population is going to slowly change to fit that new environment, it shows us that evolution is constantly happening. So here's our example here. We have a whole bunch of frogs. There's variation in that population, right? They live in a swamp with dark green leaves. So these guys hide. Those get eaten. Next, in this swamp, the light green are eaten. The dark green are better able to get out, get food, and have babies. That trait becomes popular, right? They survive and reproduce. They have better fitness. The population evolves to look like those guys. So this whole process of natural selection was coined or made up by Charles Darwin after he visited the Galapagos Islands. When he was on the Galapagos Islands, what he noticed is that there were distinct differences depending on which island animals lived on. So here's 3 pictures of tortoises, right? Their shells are all different, but let's look like around them. This guy is on grass. This one is on dirt. His shell makes it so he can stick his head up in the air, and he's actually able to eat leaves on trees. This one doesn't need to eat leaves on trees because he can eat the grass in front of him, right? So like this trait that's beneficial with this long neck guy isn't beneficial on this guy's island. Does that make sense? This last guy is just scary, and I don't know what he actually does well. He does something well. It looks like he will kill you well. Who knows? So lastly, misconceptions. So these are mistakes that people think, like common mistakes that people think about evolution. And before we knew about genes and before we knew about Mendel and all the genetics that we did last week, before we knew how things were passed, it was really easy to make mistakes regarding evolution. Lamarck was the first scientist to attempt to explain evolution. And what he believed is that you could pass traits gained in a lifetime. So he thought, and how he came up with this is he looked at giraffes, right? And he thought that the giraffes in their lifetime stretched their neck to try to get the leaves and the tops of the trees. And as they stretched their neck got longer. Then they had babies that had that long neck. Keep in mind, Lamarck didn't know about genes. So he didn't know that you can't change your genes once they're in you. Like, if I cut off my thumb and I have a baby, will it only have 4 fingers and be missing a thumb? Think about it. Don't say yes. So other misconceptions that occur is that organisms get traits that they want, right? Look at this picture of this beaver down here, right? Look at his arm. It's a chainsaw, right? And he says, now that's what I'm talking about. You can't pick what you get, right? You get what you get, and you don't get upset. You either die or you live. So if you get a good mutation, you live. If you get a bad mutation, you die. And my last misconception here, and I'm sure we'll get more this week as we talk, is that people came from monkeys. No, please don't say that. Please don't say that. There was like a small furry mammal that we diverged or became different then, and not just us. All mammals came from. Monkeys and humans, and apes and humans, primates were one of those splits. And then primates split more and more. We didn't come from monkeys. All right. Thank you for listening to the lecture. The next 2 slides actually have videos on them. That I don't think you can click on. It wouldn't work when I tried to do it. We'll watch those in class this week. All right. I will see you guys tomorrow because I'm guessing you're watching this Sunday night.